They set up a single dad on a blind date thinking he would run the moment he found out the girl was deaf. But 10 minutes later, they witnessed something that made the entire restaurant fall silent. A truth none of them dared to face. There are moments in life when we think we're in control of everything, until a small choice, a not-so-pure intention, quietly pulls us away from who we truly are. That's what happened to the three men hiding in the dim corner of Maple and Stone, a restaurant on the outskirts of Portland, that evening. In front of them lay a phone set to secretly record, its screen flickering like a spark waiting to ignite. Derek, the mastermind and also the most ambitious of the group, clenched his jaw, eyes fixed on the restaurant entrance. Beside him were Mark and Elliot, two colleagues who had been dragged into a plan they were no longer sure they should be part of. "He'll show up," Derek said, sounding more like he was reassuring himself than the others. "Ethan Brooks never skips a date. Mr. Perfect is always on time." No one replied, but tension seeped across the small, white-clothed table. Then Derek lowered his voice, cold as metal. "Once we catch the moment he runs, it's over. That department head position will never be his." Mark swallowed hard. Elliot avoided Derek's gaze, nervously rotating his water glass. They knew this plan was wrong. They knew using a deaf woman as bait for a moral test was something that should never happen. But jealousy blinds deeper than any darkness. "We just need him to show his true colors," Derek continued. "As long as he looks annoyed, disrespectful, or walks out, we upload the video to the internal forum. The boss will see he's not as righteous as the little moral mask he always wears." Mark hesitantly asked, his voice timid, "And the girl? Does she know anything?" Derek waved his hand dismissively, as though brushing aside an insignificant detail. "They already matched on the app. We just adjusted a little information. We simply didn't tell Ethan that Megan is deaf. That's all." Elliot glanced at the door and whispered, "You're sure he'll react badly?" Derek pressed his lips tight, eyes darkening. "Truly good people don't exist. He's been acting this whole time. And tonight, the act ends." Outside, the streetlights streamed through the windows, stretching across the restaurant floor like long, thin threads pulling the tension taut. What they didn't know was that the plan they thought was flawless was about to lead them all into a lesson none of them ever saw coming. Not far away in a parking lot, still carrying the evening chill of Oregon, Ethan Brooks leaned against his car door and took a deep breath. Under the soft yellow glow of a street lamp, he looked mature yet exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that didn't come from work, but from 4 long years spent living in the space left behind by his late wife. A notification lit up on his phone. "Daddy, remember to smile. She's gonna like you." Ava, his 7-year-old daughter, followed by a trail of heart emojis. Ethan let out a small laugh. It was the sound of someone trying to move forward, even though the heart never fully heals. He glanced into the side mirror. The face staring back at him was strong, yet slightly tense. "How long has it been since I last went on a date?" he wondered, then chuckled at himself. If Ava hadn't looked him in the eyes and said, "Daddy, I want to see you happy," he probably would have stayed home tonight, eating pizza and watching documentaries about earthquakes with her. Ethan closed the car door, adjusted the collar of his jacket, and strolled toward Maple and Stone. His heart wasn't racing from excitement, but from the part of him that feared he still wasn't ready for something new. When Ethan pushed open the door, warm lighting and gentle conversation welcomed him. He spoke to the hostess. "I have a reservation. Blind date with Megan." She smiled and guided him to a table by the window. From there, the streetlights cast overlapping patches of light and shadow across the table, like his own mix of emotions. Ethan sat down, his hands clasped together, unsure whether from the cold or from nerves. And in that brief moment, he saw his reflection in the window glass. A single father trying to step past his grief. A man willing to try again, even with a heart still full of cracks. He whispered, "Ava, I'll do my best. As long as you know Dad is okay." He didn't know. In another dim corner of the restaurant, 3 silhouettes were watching his every move, eagerly waiting for the moment they believed would expose who he truly was. They had no idea. The honest Ethan was about to leave all 3 of them speechless. The moment the clock on the wall hit 7 p.m., the glass door of maple and stone swung open gently. A cold draft followed the woman who stepped inside, pulling the attention of not just the diners, but also the 3 men hiding in the dark corner. Megan Hartley. She wasn't the kind of beautiful that made people turn their heads. She was the kind of beautiful that made them want to look a little longer, just to understand why she felt so comfortable. A soft blue dress, hair falling loosely with the breeze, and her eyes. Those were what made Ethan instinctively rise to his feet. Sharp, quiet eyes. The eyes of someone who had learned to read the world by watching people's expressions, rather than listening to their words. The hostess approached Megan and said something to her. Megan tilted her head, then focused intently on the hostess's lips. Ethan froze. That moment, only he noticed. The way Megan watched the shape of the hostess's mouth, the way she replied with a voice slightly soft, slightly unsure in volume, the voice of someone who cannot hear her own. In the shadows, Derek nudged Mark with his elbow. There, phase 1 starts now. What they wanted most was the moment Ethan realized the truth. But Ethan, he didn't step back, he didn't falter. He stood fully, took a deep breath, and welcomed Megan with the warmest, most genuine smile he could offer. "Hi," Ethan said softly, warmly. He extended his hand. Megan saw his lips move first, then responded, "It's nice to meet you." She smiled, a hint of shyness flickering in her eyes. A smile beautiful enough to make someone's heartbeat stumble. Ethan sat down with her, and in that exact moment, when she leaned slightly toward him to ask something, her eyes still fixed on his lips, the truth hit him harder and clearer than ever. Megan was deaf. In the corner, Derek growled under his breath, "Get ready, the golden moment's coming." He thought Ethan would panic. He thought Ethan would pull away. He thought that perfect smile would disappear immediately, but he had no idea. Ethan Brooks was nothing like what they imagined. Ethan looked at Megan for one more second, and his own past opened like an old door. A deaf mother who taught him sign language before he even knew how to spell. The evenings they spent signing together under a warm yellow lamp. A language without sound, but filled with love. Ethan tilted his head slightly, his eyes softening. Megan, she had no idea what was about to happen. She was far too used to people stumbling, awkward, or worse, pretending to be kind. But tonight, destiny would take a different turn. Ethan slowly raised both hands, and at the dark table, Derek whispered with smug anticipation, "All right. Let's see how he handles this." He didn't finish his sentence, because in that exact moment, Ethan began to sign. Beautifully, slowly, clearly, fluently, as if it were second nature. "It's very nice to meet you, Megan. Thank you for coming tonight." The entire restaurant froze for a breathless, suspended second. The three men in the corner went utterly still. Mark almost dropped his glass. Elliot's mouth fell open. And Megan? She froze. Her eyes widened, surprised, trembling. It was as if another light had just switched on in her world. No one had ever greeted her like that on a first date. No one had ever made her feel truly seen. She placed a hand over her chest and exhaled softly. You know sign language? Ethan signed back, softer than any spoken voice. ASL was the first language I ever learned. The atmosphere shifted like magic, from tense to warm, from awkward to connected. And in that cinematic, breathtaking moment, Derek, Mark, and Elliot could do nothing but sit there, watching the plan they had carefully crafted collapse right before their eyes. The moment Ethan's hands began to move, the entire Maple and Stone restaurant seemed to fall into a thin, delicate layer of silence. No clinking cutlery, no laughter, no footsteps from the servers. There was only the movement of his hands, soft, precise, meaningful, like a stream finally finding its way back to its natural flow. Megan stared, frozen. Her eyes, usually guarded and cautious, opened wide in a way so beautiful it felt as if even the ceiling lights softened for her. She had been on dozens of dates where people were awkward, clumsy, or forced in their attempts at kindness, but never, not once, had she been greeted in her own language from the very beginning. And Ethan, he signed as naturally as if he were speaking through breath. It's very nice to meet you tonight, Megan. In that stillness, the smile on his lips was so gentle that only someone truly observant would notice it. A smile not born from politeness, but from an instinctive, deeply human sense of connection. From the dark corner of the restaurant where three shadows watched his every movement, Mark could hardly believe his eyes. The glass in Elliot's hand stopped mid-air, and Derek, the man who believed he was in control, sat frozen like stone. "No way," he whispered, voice tight with disappointment and panic. "Why? How can he sign like that?" But the truth was undeniable. No one signs that beautifully if they have learned only a few minutes on YouTube. No one achieves that softness without living in this language day after day. Megan lifted her hand to her mouth as if holding in a breath on the verge of breaking. The first tear fell, not from pain, but from an emotion without a name, something rare for someone so used to disappointment. She signed back, her hands trembling. "How do you know?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes warm enough to feel like they were sending heat across the air. He signed, slow and steady. "My mom is deaf. ASL was the first language I learned." A small smile appeared on his lips, a smile of memory, of love, of a piece of the past that still lived inside him every day. In that moment, something inside Megan collapsed, not in defeat, but in surrender, to a new feeling starting to grow. Hope. Hope that she didn't have to carry the world alone, that the world still had people who listened with their hearts, not just their ears. In the dark corner, Elliot let his hand drop, his glass tapping softly against the table. Mark exhaled, as though realizing he had wandered too far from who he was supposed to be. And Derek, the man who thought he controlled everything, could only watch as his plan crumbled before him, not in the direction he wanted, but in a direction he had never been prepared to face. Because tonight, it wasn't Ethan who was exposed. It was them. Three men caught between jealousy and decency, who were laid bare. Back at the table, Megan gently touched her fingertips against the edge of the table, grounding herself. She looked at Ethan, and for the first time in 3 long years of disappointing dates, her heart whispered something so soft she could almost hear it herself. Maybe this time is different. Ethan tilted his head and signed something that made the whole atmosphere soften. If you're okay with it, shall we start with the appetizers? Megan let out a small laugh, light and pure, like a beam of light slicing through the night. And then she nodded. In that moment, sound wasn't needed. Words weren't needed. Only one simple truth. Two people had just met. And the three who set the trap had just lost themselves. The atmosphere inside Maple and Stone returned to its usual rhythm, but at the table by the window, between the warm yellow lights and the slow, graceful movement of two hands, a conversation was unfolding, gentle and different enough to make time itself seem to slow down. Megan sat with her back straighter now, no longer withdrawn the way she had been when she first arrived, and Ethan, instead of being awkward or over-politely sensitive, like so many others, spoke with her with a rare natural ease, as if this wasn't a blind date at all, but a reunion between two souls who had known each other long before tonight. "What do you do for work?" Ethan asked, signing and speaking simultaneously, creating a silent harmony. Megan smiled, her hands moving gracefully. "I'm a freelancer. Content writing, copywriting. Sometimes I take on larger projects. Working from home makes me feel safe." The word safe was signed slowly, heavily, not because of her job, but because the outside world was full of noise. She couldn't hear, yet could feel more intensely than anyone else. Ethan nodded, truly listening. He signed back, "I'm a therapist, downtown office. Mostly helping employees through conflicts, pressure." Megan tilted her head, her eyes brightening a bit. "That job requires a big heart." Ethan let out a soft laugh, a rare sound since the day his wife passed away. "I'm not sure my heart is still as big as before, but I'm trying." That sentence, gentle as it was, landed on the table like a quiet, beautiful truth. Megan sensed something behind his eyes, a wound not fully healed, the patience of someone who had once lost the most important thing. She placed her hand near the edge of the table and signed softly, "You lost someone, didn't you?" Ethan looked down at his hands. When he raised his head again, there was a half-sad smile on his face. "My wife, 4 years ago. Ava was only 3. Megan remained silent. No pity, no probing questions, just deep understanding, the very thing grieving people need most. Ethan continued, "I thought I'd never date again, until one day Ava asked me, 'Daddy, why aren't you happy like before?' A small smile touched Megan's lips. 'She pulled you back into the world.' Ethan nodded. 'Ava is my light. But sometimes, even the light wants another lamp beside it.' Megan let out a soft, emotional laugh, covering her mouth with her hand. That smile made Ethan look at her a little longer, not with the eyes of a man on a date, but of someone unconsciously realizing that the person in front of him was something rare and honest. The server arrived at their table. Ethan spoke normally to place their order while signing every sentence for Megan with such ease that even the server paused in surprise. It wasn't superficial chivalry. It wasn't an attempt to score points. It was respect. A quiet, genuine kind of care. Megan looked at him and sighed slowly. "I'm not used to being treated like normal person." Ethan paused, tilting his head. "You are a normal person, and extraordinary. Not because you're deaf, but because you're strong in ways most people don't understand." Megan bit her lower lip, not to hide her emotions, but to steady herself. She signed back, Thank you for not treating me like a test. Ethan smiled. I didn't come here to test anyone. I just wanted to reconnect with life. For real. Then he paused. His fingers tapped lightly on the wooden table as if keeping time with a thought drifting across his mind. And tonight, I think I found that. Megan lowered her gaze slightly. If hearts could make sound, the place where they sat would be filled with something extraordinary. In the dark corner, the three men who set the trap could only watch. Slowly, their smugness dissolved, leaving behind only a heavy realization that they had just witnessed the real character of the man they tried to sabotage. But at that softly lit table, no darkness could intrude. There were only two people, gently stepping closer into each other's worlds. Dinner passed in a warmth so genuine that Ethan sometimes forgot this was supposed to be a first date. There were no awkward questions, no uneasy pauses, just two people opening their hearts, just enough for light to slip through. Megan told him about the writing projects she'd done, about the times she'd been rejected, not because of her ability, but because of the silence. She couldn't control herself. Ethan talked about his patients, the stories he never revealed names for, but enough for Megan to see that he was someone who listened with his heart, not his ears. Then dessert arrived, a slice of cheesecake neither of them had planned to order, but both secretly wanted to try, to see who would cave first. Megan smiled, her eyes bright. You know, this is the first date where I don't have to pretend to be strong. Ethan replied with a gentle smile. Then just be yourself. I like that. Megan paused for a heartbeat, this time because she was moved, not doubtful. She looked down and cut a small piece of the cake, and in that simple, quiet moment, Ethan's eyes shifted to something behind her. He froze, then frowned. Megan looked up, seeing him staring toward the dark corner of the restaurant. She turned, and her heart tightened. Three men. A phone was halfway hidden on the table. A dark lens is pointing straight at them. Megan couldn't hear her heartbeat speeding up, but she felt every single thump, sharp as if striking bone. She looked back at Ethan. His eyes hardened, then softened the moment he saw the fear flicker across her face. No words needed. No signs needed. She understood. He understood. Ethan set his knife down, his hand tightening slightly. This was the moment he had to choose. Hide or confront. He leaned closer to her and signed slowly, every gesture clear. They're my colleagues. Megan blinked, breath stuttering. Why would they? Ethan looked into her eyes, apology pouring not just from his expression but from his very presence. I think they're testing me. Testing. The word fell into Megan's chest like a blade. She placed her hand on the table, grasping it until her knuckles turned white. In the dim light, her eyes held years of contained hurt. So, I'm a test? Every one of her signs was sharp as a knife, not from anger, but from a sadness so deep it made breathing difficult. Ethan immediately shook his head. He signed faster, stronger. No, not from me. I didn't know anything until I saw them. Megan turned slightly as if trying to hide the emotion rising within her, but tears still filled her eyes. She signed back, hands trembling. You might not have known, but I feel it. I've been a test for so many people already. The room seemed to tilt around her. Voices from old dates echoed in her memory. Oh, you're deaf? I don't think I'd be compatible with someone like you. How would you even love if you can't hear? All those shards of past pain came crashing down at once. Ethan caught the moment her gaze cracked. He exhaled slowly and placed his hand halfway across the table, not touching her, just close enough so she would know he was there. Megan, I'm sorry for what they did. But what's between us is real. Megan pressed her lips together, fighting to steady her breath. She signed softly. What, in this evening, wasn't a test? Ethan looked at her, looked deeply, searching for the right words in a language without sound. Then he signed, each motion slow and beautiful, like a promise. The moments I spoke with you, the moments you smiled, the moments you looked down, then looked up again to sign what you thought. All of that was real. The narrator inside Megan's heart cracked into a single breath. Ethan continued. If this was a test, then it was my test. And I want you to know, I choose you, not because they trapped me, but because of you. It was a sentence that made Megan turn away, covering her mouth to hold back a sob. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her as a whole, not lacking, not pitiable. Only Ethan. In the dark corner, the three men who set the trap went still. No more smirking, no more recording, no more confidence that they knew who Ethan truly was. Because in that moment, the truth was undeniable. They hadn't exposed Ethan. Ethan had exposed them. The air inside Maple and Stone seemed to still, as if someone had pressed a universal pause button on the entire room. A server walked by, footsteps so light it felt like everyone must be imagining it. The restaurant was still alive, still breathing, but at the small window-side table, another world had opened. A world where hearts and old wounds finally faced each other. Megan lowered her head, her fingers woven tightly together. She didn't want Ethan to see her trembling, not out of shame, but because she had spent a lifetime learning to be strong enough to protect her own heart. Then, a subtle movement appeared beside her. Ethan placed his hand on the table, close to hers, not touching, just close enough for her to feel his warmth. He leaned in slightly, his eyes never leaving hers, not for a second. Megan, he signed slowly, each motion like he was carefully placing every word into her heart, never rushing, never imposing. I want you to know something. Megan looked up. Her eyes were glossy, her long lashes trembling. Ethan inhaled deeply, as if preparing to open a door he had kept locked for 4 long years. Then he signed, each movement so gentle and beautiful that Megan instinctively held her breath. Tonight, it is the first time in 4 years I feel like I'm actually living. Megan froze. Ethan continued. Not just existing, not just trying for Ava, but living. A slight shift in the dark corner made Derek flinch. Mark sat still. Elliot stared at the floor, unable to handle the truth in front of them. But Ethan didn't look their way. He looked only at Megan, as if she were the only thing in the frame. I didn't know they were recording. I didn't know they were setting me up. I only knew that the moment you walked in, I wanted to understand you. Megan placed a hand on her chest, feeling every heartbeat pounding against her ribs. Ethan continued, his voice blending with his hands in a bilingual confession full of emotion. I want you to believe that I'm not here out of pity, not because of some cruel game, not because of an obligatory date. He paused, then signed the following sentence with such sincerity that even the air seemed to hold its breath. I'm here because I truly want to know who you are. A tear slipped down Megan's cheek, but this time she didn't wipe it away. She let it fall, because it wasn't a tear of weakness, but of being understood. Ethan saw it, and his hands moved again, slow and deliberate, speaking the last truth of his confession. If you'll let me, I want to know even more. Megan exhaled sharply, as if compressing 3 years of hurt into a single breath. Then she raised her hands, trembling but clear, like a long-closed door finally opening. I don't want to be anyone's test anymore. Ethan responded immediately, not letting her stand alone in that fear even for a moment. You're not a test, he signed, each motion steady and strong. You're someone I want to get to know. Megan looked at him for a long moment. Silence, caution, fear, hope, all of it reflected in her eyes. Then she signed a sentence with the faintest, softest smile. I trust you, but only a little. Ethan laughed, a quiet, genuine laugh that wrinkled the corners of his eyes. He signed back, I'll start with that little bit. In the dark corner, the 3 men who set the trap exchanged glances. No one spoke. No one needed to. They all knew. Their plan had turned to ash. And from a distance, the streetlight shining through the glass cast a soft glow on Megan's face, revealing a woman who no longer looked weak, no longer looked wounded, no longer looked like a victim, but like someone who, for the first time, was allowing herself to step out of the shadows of her past. The second date didn't happen at a restaurant. No candles, no white tablecloths, no formal atmosphere like the first time. Instead, it began with a short Saturday morning message from Ethan. Ava keeps asking about you. If you're okay with it, I'd like to introduce you to. Megan finished reading and her heart skipped, not out of worry, but because it felt like trust, like being considered significant. She replied, I'll come. Ethan's house sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood with a white picket fence, a small front garden full of lavender, and a wind chime that sang each time a breeze passed through. When Megan stepped onto the porch, the door swung open immediately. A little girl with curly hair and eyes bright as droplets of honey appeared with a smile so wide it made the world feel sunnier. Ava. In her hands was a thick book about volcanoes. On her shirt was a heart drawn in colored markers, and on her face, endless excitement. But what made Megan freeze wasn't the cuteness. It was the fact that Ava was signing. Clumsy, simple, but incredibly determined. Hello, nice to meet you. Her tiny hands trembled with nerves. Her eyes watched Megan with so much hope. Ethan stepped out from behind her, smiling. We practiced all morning for this. Megan's heart sank in the softest, most overwhelming way. She needed several seconds just to steady her breath, because that moment, a child trying to learn her language just to greet her, it was beautiful enough to soften even the oldest wounds. She responded to Ava in ASL. I'm very happy to meet you too. Ava spun around excitedly. Daddy, I did it right! Ethan laughed, leaning against the doorframe. Better than right. Inside, the house carried the warmth of years spent in a father-daughter world. Scattered drawings, old family photos, a pile of children's books on the table, and a chubby cat sprawled across the sofa like it owned the place. Ava pulled Megan into her room immediately. No hesitation, no guarding, just the pure affection of a child who believes in good things. She showed Megan every little treasure she had, a lava rock collection, a hand-drawn volcano map, a clay model of a crater, and a small wooden-framed photo of Ava and her mother. Megan touched the frame, her expression softening. Ava watched her, voice going quiet. "This is my mom, before she went to the sky." Ethan paused at the doorway, easing his hand into a loose fist. Megan sat beside Ava. She didn't offer cliches. She didn't hug her out of pity. She simply signed very slowly, very gently. "You're so strong." Ava tilted her head, her big eyes curious. "What about you? Are you strong?" A child's innocent question, landing right on the softest part of Megan's heart. She smiled faintly. "I'm learning to be stronger every day." Ava thought for a moment, then nodded like a tiny grown-up. "Then I'll help you. Okay?" Megan laughed, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Not the tears of pain, but the tears of feeling something she thought she'd lost forever. The sense of belonging somewhere. 2 hours later, they sat together at the kitchen counter. Ava practiced more signing. The cat lay flattened next to a pile of crayons. Ethan stood by the counter baking cookies, glancing over at them with a smile that was impossibly gentle. At one point, Megan turned to him and signed, "She's wonderful." Ethan signed back, but this time his eyes stayed on Megan a little too long. "You two are more alike than you think." Megan lowered her gaze toward her cup of cocoa, shy, but her heart had never pounded so loudly in the warm kitchen of someone else's home. There was no dramatic moment, no explosive confession, only this. A woman who thought the world had left her behind, a single father who thought his heart had been locked shut, and a 7-year-old girl who just wanted to see her dad happy. On that quiet afternoon, the three of them found one another. Not loudly, not showily, just simply, truly. Monday morning at Skyline and Company, the therapy office was washed in the pale gray light of a Portland sky. Keystrokes, the hiss of the coffee machine, and quiet conversations echoed through the open workspace. Ethan walked in, his expression calm as always, but his heart still carried traces of yesterday's warm afternoon, the one where Megan and Ava sat together, laughing in the soft kitchen glow. He had never noticed how beautiful they were until then. He hung his coat and prepared to start the day. Then he saw them. Derek, Mark, Elliot. The three stood near the coffee machine, looking like men who had just survived a psychological storm, their faces tense, eyes fixed on the floor. None of them dared look up when they noticed him. In that moment, Ethan knew. This silence was no coincidence. He approached slowly and calmly, placing his mug on the counter. No one greeted him. No one spoke. Finally, Mark cracked first. He swallowed hard, his voice rough like someone who hadn't slept all night. "Ethan, please, hear us out." Ethan wasn't angry. He didn't snap. He simply crossed his arms, leaned lightly against the counter and looked at them, not with judgment, just with quiet expectancy. Derek spoke next. No arrogance now, no trademark smirk. He spoke in a low voice, like a man confessing in front of a mirror. "We did it out of jealousy." A confession so heavy it made the air stand still. Elliot added, voice shaking. "Same salary, same position, but the boss always trusts you. You're always called to solve the hard cases. You always stand out." Mark continued, as if completing the chain of truth. "And when there were rumors about the department head position, we couldn't take it." Derek let out a bitter laugh. "So instead of improving ourselves, we looked for a way to pull you down." Ethan stayed silent, though his eyes were no longer as gentle as usual. They were the eyes of someone who had been stabbed in the back, but refused to let his heart harden. Derek went on, this time with a voice cracking like something breaking inside him. We thought you were fake. Thought you were acting like the good guy to score points. Thought one small push would expose you. Ethan took a slow breath, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of those words. Mark whispered, "But that night, we saw who you really are." Elliot nodded, eyes already red. You respected Megan. You spoke with her like she was anyone else. No avoiding, no pity. You made us confront ourselves. Derek took a step forward. He still couldn't look Ethan in the eye. We told the CFO everything this morning. Gave him the video. Then deleted it. He inhaled shakily. The CFO said he'll handle the disciplinary action, but before he does anything, we wanted to come to you first. Elliot added softly, so softly it was quieter than the coffee machine. We're really sorry. All three of them stood still. No excuses, no pleading for forgiveness, no expectation that Ethan would forget. They simply stood there, their mistakes naked and undeniable. Ethan set his coffee cup down. The soft tap echoed like a knock on the door of truth. He looked at the three men and spoke, voice low but clear. The saddest part of all this is... He paused, then continued with a calmness they never expected. If you had just talked to me once, just once, you would have realized I had nothing to perform. The words fell like a gentle knife, not meant to kill, but to make the listener hurt enough to wake up. Ethan straightened. I'm not perfect. I get irritable when I'm tired. I burn dinner 3 nights a week, and I still don't know how to braid Ava's hair properly. A thin smile crossed his face. But the things you thought I fake are just my life. The three of them lowered their heads. No one spoke. Ethan opened the lid of his coffee, turned away, but just before walking off, he paused one last moment. I'm not sure I can forgive right away, but I hear you. And I understand. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't letting go, but it was the first step, the one that keeps hurting from turning into hatred. Ethan walked away. His office door closed softly, just enough to let the three men know that the worst was over, and the most challenging part was just beginning. 2 weeks after that confrontation, the Portland sky was quiet, as if waiting for something good to happen. Inside the glass building of Skyline and Company, Ethan stood outside the CFO's office, hands lightly gripping a folder as he took a deep breath. He wasn't expectant. He wasn't hopeful. After everything that had happened, his heart had learned how to stay calm. He just wanted to do his job well. The job he chose was not to stand out, but to heal. The door opened. The CFO, an older man with silver hair and years of wisdom etched around his eyes, looked at him over thin metal-frame glasses. Ethan, come in. His voice wasn't stern, but it wasn't entirely relaxed either. Ethan stepped inside, sat down in the leather chair across from him, and maintained his composure. The CFO set a folder down, clasped his hands, and said, I watched the full video your colleagues brought in. Ethan stayed silent. No excuses, no deflection. 1 breath passed. 2. Ethan. The CFO looked straight into his eyes, his tone deep and deliberate. The way you treated her, natural, respectful, empathetic. That's the quality I need the head of our therapy department to have. Ethan's heart dropped slightly, not out of pride, but out of the realization that those moments of sincerity Finally, I found a place where I could be understood correctly. The CFO continued, and this time a rare smile appeared. I believe you're the best person for the head therapist position. For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. Not because he was shocked, but because all the hurt, pressure, doubt, and heaviness seemed to lift off his shoulders with that single sentence. The CFO rose and extended his hand. Congratulations, Ethan. Ethan shook it, a wave of relief and honesty spreading through him. As he stepped out of the office, sunlight reflected off the long row of windows, bright enough to feel like a silent congratulation. He strolled, not rushing, not because he was tired, but because he wanted to remember this moment for a long time. At the end of the hallway, his phone vibrated. A message from Megan. He opened it. Congratulations, Ethan. Ava and I are so proud of you. Tonight, if you'd like, I'll bring over some pineapple-free pizza. We can celebrate together? Ethan stopped walking. The long hallway behind him blurred, leaving only that one text, simple, soft, yet capable of filling the empty spaces he once thought would never be filled again. He leaned back gently against the wall, smiling without realizing it. Not a polite smile, but the smile of a heart slowly healing, in the right way, with the right person, at the right time. He typed back, pineapple-free pizza, 6 p.m. A tiny smiling emoji arrived from Megan right after, and Ethan realized it had been a very long time since he'd looked forward to an evening this much. At the end of the hallway, Derek, Mark, and Elliot stood quietly. They didn't dare approach, just watched Ethan's silhouette, slim but strong, moving farther down the hall. Mark whispered, "He really is the one who deserves it." Elliot nodded. And Derek, the one who had started it all, looked down at his hands as if seeing something inside himself cracking. "We tried to prove he was fake. But in the end, he's the one who exposed us." No one responded. There was nothing left to say. Ethan put on his coat and stepped outside. The Portland sky was still softly gray, but he felt as if somewhere among the clouds, a thin streak of light was starting to open. Enough to feel hope. Enough to want to keep going. And enough to know that, tonight, in a small house in the suburbs, 2 people were waiting for him. With pizza, with smiles, and with something growing between them. Something that hadn't yet been given a name. The next 6 months passed as gently as summer breath. Quiet, light, but enough to change the entire world of 3 people. No significant events, no loud beginnings, just peaceful days stacking softly on top of each other, forming a kind of happiness each of them once believed they would never touch. After the celebratory pizza night on Ethan's promotion day, the rhythm among Ethan, Megan, and Ava slowly shaped itself into something of its own. Afternoons when Megan dropped by to help Ava with homework, evenings when Ethan cooked simple dinners while Megan taught Ava new signs, Sunday mornings spent wandering through Forest Park just to watch the sunlight filter through the leaves. All of it blended into a kind of warm familiarity none of them could pinpoint the beginning of. Riverside Grill became the place they returned to every Friday night. The familiar waiter would smile under the warm yellow light whenever they walked in. "Your family table is ready." The word family slipped into Megan's ears as something both strange and perfectly right. She would glance at Ethan, and he would look back. Neither of them said a word, but their smiles carried the same quiet acknowledgement. Something real, something like a family, was forming between them. Weekdays were filled with tiny moments that somehow filled the heart. In the mornings, Ethan woke early to prepare Ava's lunch and helped Megan smooth the blouse she planned to wear for an online meeting. In the evenings, Megan sat beside Ava, teaching her to sign bigger words like brave, proud, and thank you. And Ava became the invisible bridge between two adults who once struggled to open their hearts. The way she tugged their hands together, the way she said things out loud that adults took hours to phrase properly, turning the small house into a space constantly lit by a kind of inner sunlight. One evening, while Ava lay on the living room floor drawing her newest volcano map, Megan sat next to Ethan on the sofa, watching the little girl. The room felt warm, like a cocoon, the yellow light wrapping around them in a natural intimacy so familiar that Megan startled herself, as if she had lived there for years. She placed her hand on the couch and signed quietly, "I used to think I'd live alone forever." Ethan turned to her, gentle but not intrusively curious. "Why?" Megan looked down at her own hands, the same hands that had shielded her heart more times than she cared to remember. She signed slowly, "Because I got tired of explaining myself, tired of making others comfortable, tired of being their experiment. Sometimes being alone felt easier." Ethan paused for a few seconds, then his hand moved gently. "You don't have to explain anything to me. From the beginning, I wanted to understand you. Not what you lack, but what you are." Megan lowered her head, trying to hide the tear rising in her eye. But Ava looked up right at that moment, cocked her head, and asked in a childlike voice, surprisingly sharp, "Are you two being romantic again?" Megan burst into laughter. Ethan blushed, and Ava, serious like a tiny teacher, added, "I don't understand all the signs, but I know when Daddy likes someone." Their laughter filled the room, light, clear, alive. No one tried to define what this was. No one labeled it. No one rushed to name the feeling. But they all felt it. A family rhythm quietly growing among three people who once thought time had left them behind. Another evening at Riverside Grill, Megan twisted the silver ring on her finger while Ethan helped Ava choose her meal. He noticed immediately, he always did, and tilted his head. "What's going on?" Megan inhaled softly, a hint of worry in her eyes. "I got a big contract offer. They want me full-time at the office, downtown." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Megan, that's an amazing opportunity." She nodded, but her smile wavered slightly. "I'm scared. I'm used to working from home. It's safe there. But going out?" She placed her hand over her chest where her heart had taken too many blows. "I'm scared I'll shrink again." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then sighed with gentle but firm clarity. "You've been shrinking yourself for too long. It's time the world sees you, in your real size." Megan lifted her gaze. Her eyes softened, brightened, as if she had just been handed a key to a door she had been afraid to touch. Ethan continued, his voice blending with his signs like a promise. "And if you step out, I'll walk with you. Not to shield you, but to walk beside you." Megan bit her lip to keep the tears steady, then signed very softly, "You'll go with me?" Ethan smiled, his eyes warm enough to soften the whole room. "Always." Ava looked up just then, chocolate still smeared on her face.
"When Daddy says always, something big is about to happen."
The whole restaurant chuckled, and Megan laughed too, the laugh of someone stepping out of the old box she once hid in for safety. In that moment, no one said it out loud, but all of them knew. This was no longer just a relationship. This was a family. A year and 3 months after their first date, Portland stepped into autumn. Golden leaves covered the roads around Waterfront Park, and the breeze carried the scent of damp pine wood and freshly roasted coffee from nearby cafes. In that crisp chill, the little family of three, Ethan, Megan, and Ava, returned once again to Riverside Grill, the place where everything began. Ava wore a navy blue dress with silver stars, her hair tied high, excitement on her face as if she were about to watch fireworks. Ethan had a tie on. His hands were a bit shaky, despite practicing in front of the mirror all week. And Megan? She wore a soft, cream-colored sweater, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, her smile warm as the yellow streetlight outside. But only Ethan knew. Tonight was not just another dinner. Their table was still the one by the window, where warm lights reflected off the glassware like tiny flickering stars. The familiar menu, the familiar dishes, the familiar scenery. But Ethan's heart beat out of rhythm. Ava kept glancing at him, trying desperately not to giggle. Megan, unaware of anything unusual, continued signing playful stories from her day to Ava. Then dessert arrived. Ethan placed his hand gently on the table, a subtle signal. Ava sprang to her feet, ran around the table, and stood before Megan. "Megan," Ava signed slowly, each gesture practiced repeatedly for a whole month. "I want to ask you something really important." Megan laughed softly, bending down to be eye level. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Ava inhaled, a big, determined breath only a 7-year-old could take, then signed, eyes wide with hope. "Do you want to become a part of our family forever?" Megan froze. She lifted her hand to her mouth, eyes wide, then looked toward Ethan, searching for clarity. But Ethan had already stood up. He walked around the table, each step slow, deliberate, like he wanted to remember every second of this moment. When he reached her, he sank on one knee, breath steady but heart unmistakably trembling. Megan covered her mouth. The entire restaurant fell silent at once. Ethan opened a small velvet box. The overhead light caught the simple silver ring, sending a soft glimmer across Megan's cheek. He looked up at her, eyes deep, peaceful, and more certain than ever before. Then he signed, every movement slow and tender, as though writing the words into the air. "Megan Ellis, you walked into my life when I thought I was done with love." Megan trembled. Her whole body softened in emotion. Ethan continued, "You showed me that a heart doesn't die when it's been hurt. It only sleeps. And you're the one who woke it." His voice wavered, but his hands were steady. "You made Ava laugh more. You made my home brighter. You turned our lives into something I never thought I'd get to dream again." Megan placed a hand on her chest, breathing unevenly as tears spilled uncontrollably. Ava stood beside her, holding her hand, giving her strength. Ethan placed a hand over his heart, then signed the final words, words that made the entire room hold its breath. "I'm not asking you to complete us, because we're not missing anything. I'm asking you to choose us every day, the way we choose you." He opened the ring box fully, eyes holding only one truth. "Megan Ellis, will you marry me?" No one knew who cried first, Megan or Ava, or the waiter standing at the following table. All they knew was that Megan's hands shook so hard she needed both of them to sign. "Yes. Yes. Yes." Applause erupted across the restaurant. Ava threw her arms around both of them, forming a clumsy, warm embrace so full of heart that even strangers smiled. Ethan slipped the ring onto Megan's finger, then pulled her into a long, trembling hug she had waited her whole life for. Megan rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his breath, his trembling, his truth. and understood one simple thing. This is where she belonged. Not because of pity, not because of a test, but because of love, clear, honest, complete. Ava, still wrapped in their arms, signed quietly, "Now, our family is perfect." And to Ethan and Megan, there was no blessing more beautiful in the world. 3 weeks after the proposal that made Riverside Grill erupt in applause, Portland was covered in a layer of sunlight as soft as melted vanilla cream in the sky. Not too bright, not too pale, just enough to make the heart feel peaceful. Megan stepped into a small bridal boutique in the Pearl District, a place with large glass windows, warm yellow lights, and white dresses hanging like clouds waiting to be cherished. The moment the door opened, the soft chime rang. The shop owner, a graceful silver-haired woman named Clara, smiled. "Welcome, Megan. I've been expecting you." Megan returned a small smile. Her heart thumped, not out of anxiety, but because reality was becoming so beautiful, she had to breathe deeply just to believe she deserved it. Clara guided her into a spacious fitting room where 3 dresses were already waiting. No excessive glitter, no overwhelming lace. All of them had that refined, modern, elegant beauty, just like her. Megan ran her hand over an A-line dress with delicate lace sleeves, and her heart touched a kind of emotion she had never named before. "I'm really getting married." She tried the first dress. Beautiful, but not the one. She tried the second. Elegant, but missing the right feeling. Then she stepped into the third dress, and everything fell silent. The gown hugged gently at the waist, the long lace sleeves giving her a graceful silhouette. The skirt flowed like water, not too grand, not too simple, just right. Clara stood behind her, smiling with quiet satisfaction. "That's the dress for you." Megan placed a hand over her heart, staring into the mirror. In that moment, she saw something she hadn't dared imagine for years. She looked happy, clearly, completely, and beautiful in the way only a woman truly loved can be. She spun softly. The skirt moved like the sigh of a closing door to her past. She took out her phone, snapped a small close-up, not the whole dress, just a detail of the lace sleeve, and texted Ethan. "I found the dress." Seconds later, her screen lit up, a text from him. "Is it perfect?" Megan covered her mouth, smiling as her heart melted. She replied, "More than perfect." Ethan texted again almost instantly. "Ava is running around the living room because she can't wait to see a picture. Can you send just a little peek?" Megan sent a photo of the lace sleeve, just a tiny fragment. Immediately, Ethan replied. Ava screamed. And as for me, I'm sitting here reminding myself to be patient for the next 3 weeks. Megan burst into laughter right inside the shop, covering her face in pure joy. Then Ethan sent another message, this time slower, warmer, deep enough to sting her eyes. I love you, Megan. Not because of the dress, but because you're the woman who lived through years of sadness to get here. Megan stood still, her phone suddenly feeling alive, as if it carried warmth straight from the man across the city who had opened a new life for her with nothing but quiet sincerity. She touched her stomach, exhaling long and trembling with emotion. Then she typed back, no flourish, no dramatics. I love you, and I feel lucky every single day. Clara watched from behind, smiling knowingly. That look in your eyes while texting? That's the look of someone about to enter a beautiful marriage. Megan smiled through watery eyes, and she knew She was no longer the woman of disappointing dates. She had become the woman of a home, in every sense of the word. She twirled once more, and for the first time in her life, she looked in the mirror and didn't see less, didn't see flaws, didn't see fear. She saw herself, whole, confident, at peace. That is what the right kind of love gives you. The night before the wedding, Portland rested under soft golden streetlights. Ethan's house felt quieter than usual, not out of sadness, but because anticipation wrapped itself around every breath. Ava was already asleep, hugging her stuffed cat, and the volcano drawing for Mommy Megan. Megan was staying at her best friend's place, like every bride does. And Ethan stood at Ava's bedroom door, leaning his shoulder against the wooden frame. The nightlight cast a gentle glow across the little girl's face, peaceful as an angel. He stepped inside, sat beside her bed, and brushed his fingers through her soft curls. Even in her sleep, Ava moved her hands lightly, signing a few shapes as if she were practicing inside her dreams. Ethan whispered, quiet enough not to wake her, but loud enough for his own heart to hear clearly. "Tomorrow, you'll have a mom." He paused. His voice tightened. 3 years ago, I thought my heart would never open again. A deep breath, a long silence. But then you grew up, and you taught me that love isn't something we get only once. Ava shifted, her small hand reaching out instinctively for his arm. Ethan held it gently, lowered his head, and let a tear, one he'd hidden for years, fall onto her tiny hand. "Thank you for believing your dad deserves new happiness." He watched her for another long moment, his heart trembling with gratitude for a little girl who had lost too much, too young. Yet somehow, she still kept her heart open to the world. When Ethan finally stood and walked toward the door, he stopped at the threshold. A quiet confession slipped from his lips, almost as if he were sending it into the air. "And thank you, Megan, for giving back the heart I thought was too broken to mend." The door closed softly behind him, but his heart was opening wide. The wedding took place in a small garden by the Willamette River. White tents stood beneath the morning sun. Lavender lined the aisle, its scent drifting softly like a peaceful breath. Ava ran ahead, her little white dress fluttering, jumping and signing wildly. "I'm so nervous!" Guests laughed. Ethan looked at his daughter, then in the direction Megan would appear, his heart pounding as if he were meeting life again for the first time. And then, the wooden door opened. Megan stepped out, wearing the dress she chose in the Pearl District, graceful, soft, stopping every gaze in its tracks. She didn't walk forward immediately. She took a long breath, her eyes slightly wet. Like someone who had lived in darkness for too long, now seeing light so bright it almost hurt. Ethan looked at her, and for a moment the entire world held its breath. Ava ran to her, grabbed her hand, and signed a long message she had practiced for 2 weeks. "You're the most beautiful mom in the world. You don't need to hear music. You're already the most beautiful song in my heart." Megan broke into tears. No hiding, no holding back. Ethan stepped forward to take her hand, and in the middle of the garden, surrounded by friends and witnesses, he signed the sentence only the two of them understood most deeply. "Thank you for choosing us." The ceremony was simple but sincere. No flowery vows, no elaborate promises. Just Ethan placing a hand over his heart, signing, "I promise to walk with you, not in front, not behind, but beside you." Megan looked into his eyes and sighed. "You're the peace I once thought I didn't deserve." Ava stood between them, raised both hands, and shouted,
"Kiss already!"
Everyone burst into laughter. Ethan leaned in and kissed Megan amidst cheers, applause, laughter, and sunlight falling over them like gold dust scattered across their shoulders. As they left the aisle, Ava signed something that made every adult fall silent for a moment. Family doesn't start with blood. Family starts when hearts choose each other. Ethan pulled both of them into his arms, and they knew this day wasn't just a wedding. It was a celebration of love. It was the day 3 hearts officially became a home. If today's story touched your heart, let it remind you that happiness is never too late. Even if you've lost, even if you've been hurt, even if you thought you didn't deserve love, there will always be a place, a person, a moment that opens your heart again. If you want to hear more healing, human, and hope-filled stories like this, leave a comment, a share, or a subscribe. You're not just supporting the channel. You're spreading kindness. Deep Life Tales, where the gentlest stories change us the most.